President Trump sends his border czar to Minneapolis after another shooting death at the hands of federal immigration officers. Republicans in Congress are calling for hearings. Trump and Governor Walz talk and seek common ground. Can it be found? A partial government shutdown now looks more likely. Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy explains what Minneapolis and ICE enforcement have to do with it. The winter storm struck with much of its predicted ferocity. The nation is digging out and trying to get moving and powered back up while still in the grip of sub-freezing temperatures. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. We are upstairs from our super cool, super chill studio downstairs because, well, it's been too chill here and too snowy. We have fewer stagehands today, and so here upstairs we need some robocams and everything that comes with it. I told you when we launched the show that we would chronicle these times. A great deal happened today dealing with Minneapolis and immigration enforcement. I promise you we will get to that momentarily. But first, we will, because we must, chronicle what happened this weekend and what was said about what happened. Because what you saw and what was said about what you saw matters greatly for this country, this administration, expectations of justice, and the preservation of constitutional rights. Alex Pretti, an intensive care nurse with the Veterans Administration, was shot and killed by federal officials. They surrounded him after knocking him to the ground. There was pepper spray before that. Pretti was helping two other women. All three were protesting immigration enforcement. Pretti was using his cell phone to record immigration actions. Federal officials regarded Pretti's behavior as obstructive. Typically, obstruction is met with arrest. The agents who descended on Pretti outnumbered him at least 5-1. Achieving an arrest, therefore, was not beyond reason. In fact, it would have been the most rational de-escalatory reaction. Pretti died at the scene. A 9mm handgun that he had a permit to carry was taken from his waistband before he was shot. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Pretti, quote, attacked federal officers. Customs and Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino said, quote, it looked like Pretti wanted to massacre law enforcement. Top White House advisor Stephen Miller called Pretti, quote, a would-be assassin who tried to, quote, murder, unquote, federal officers. The White House today refused to endorse any of these statements. Was Pretti exercising his First Amendment rights or impeding federal law enforcement? The audience for this program, large and diverse as it is, may differ on the answer to that question. And however you come down on that answer, two other questions painfully intrude. Did Alex Pretti have to die? And upon his death, did Pretti deserve to be called a domestic terrorist, bent on massacre or murder? How we answer those questions will, in large measure, decide how America proceeds from what this weekend former President Bill Clinton called a moment that will shape our history for years to come, and that former President Barack Obama described as a wake-up call. The stress of all this falls upon Minneapolis and Minnesota in many ways, politically and for local law enforcement. Here is the chief of police in Minneapolis.
This is not sustainable. This police department has only 600 police officers. We are stretched incredibly thin. This is taking an enormous toll trying to manage all of this chaos on top of having to be the police department for a major city. It's too much.
And here is Minnesota Republican Chris Maddow, who today ended his race for governor.
I cannot support the National Republican's stated retribution on the citizens of our state, nor can I count myself a member of a party that would do so. Operation Metro Surge has expanded far beyond its stated focus on true public safety threats.
Top House Republicans still place more blame on Minneapolis than federal immigration officials, which now in the city number about 3,000.
They've got some failed local leadership. They let their city burn down years ago. They have chaos, it seems like, all the time in places where other cities don't. ICE is operating in a lot of cities, Margaret, and you don't have these kind of incidents in any other city but Minneapolis.
If I were President Trump, I would almost think about, okay, if the mayor and the governor are going to put our ICE officials in harm's way, and there's a chance of losing more, innocent lives or whatever, then maybe go to another city and let the people of Minneapolis decide, do we want to continue to have all of these illegals?
The state of Minnesota was in court today seeking a federal order to end Operation Metro Surge. The president sent his border czar, Tom Homan, to take over operations in Minneapolis. And the president said after a call with Democratic Governor Tim Walz, the two were now on a similar wavelength. For more on today's events and what may come next, we turn to Lilia Luciano in Minneapolis. Lilia, the latest.
Hey there, Major. Well, I have been on the ground now for 2 days, just hearing from people. Right now, where we are is where Alex Pretti was killed. As you can see, there's a growing memorial. People are solemn, quiet. I have seen many people coming up here, bringing flowers, crying. I've also been hearing from local business owners. I've sat with an immigration attorney. I sat with a legal immigrant who was detained for 24 hours. He said that agents told him it was, this happened in the early days of the operation, that it was because he looked Hispanic. He said his community is afraid. The immigration attorney tells me that they are overwhelmed. And I just sat with a local business owner who tells me that he's not an activist, but that the moment Renee Good was killed, and then when Alex Pretti was killed, he took out to the street to see what was happening, and he describes what is happening in Minneapolis as a war zone. He says it's unlike anything I have ever seen, including 2020. What we heard from lawmakers in D.C. about how ICE is carrying out operations and raids in other cities and not meeting the same kind of violence is something that I also heard from the head of the GOP here in Minnesota, who I sat with today. It seems like there is this narrative from one side that is saying the reason things are violent is because protesters are more violent. From the people in the community that I've heard from, they're saying the reason things are more violent is because they are targeting us. They're saying this is a political fight coming from the Trump administration that has been zeroing in not just on the immigrant community here, on the Somali community here, starting with, as we have been reporting on and as we've witnessed those fraud allegations, but also now on the protester community and specifically on the leadership of the city. This is what I keep hearing here, that there is that tense division between state's administration, the city's administration, and then the Trump administration at the federal level. And that seems to be the most active fight that is happening under all of this.
On the scene for us, Lilia Luciano, with all the conversations you are having and the reporting that stems from it. Thank you very much. I want to bring in Rodney Harrison. He is a CBS News law enforcement contributor and former police commissioner for Suffolk County, New York. Rodney, how do you evaluate from a basic tactical perspective what played out early Saturday morning involving the death of Alex Pretti?
Yeah, so, Major, thank you so much for having me on the show. And first and foremost, I want to share my condolences with the Pretti family. This is an absolute tragedy that has occurred, as well as the situation that happened with Renee Good. But if you just take a look at the beginning parts of this situation, I have some questions. And when you take a look at what was the de-escalation strategy that was in place? I know there was an initial engagement with Mr. Pretti, trying to move him out of their what they called a crime scene and trying to get him back on the sidewalk. There were a couple other observers that were also engaged with the agents that got shoved into the snow and that Mr. Pretti tried to help up. But then it got to a point where the agents were in a place where they were going to put Mr. Pretti under arrest. And one of the agents observed a firearm in his back and pulled it out of his waistband. The question that I have is, did that situation get relayed over to the other agents? Did the other agents know when the one agent that pulled out the gun and they were screaming, "Gun, gun, he has a gun"? Did the other agents know that at that time Mr. Pretti was unarmed. And, you could see a situation where they were trying to put his hands behind his back. It seemed like Mr. Pretti might have been resisting in some way, and his hands were not visible, which I'm sure led to a level of fear for the agents, which unfortunately led to one of the agents pulling out their firearm and unfortunately killing Mr. Pretti. So a lot of concerns, a lot of questions need to be answered. There needs to be an investigation, a neutral, unbiased partnership investigation with the federal as well as the state investigators to try to get down to the bottom of this and see what they could do to make sure these incidents don't happen going forward.
Rodney, I'm glad you raised all those questions, and I want to bore in, if I could, on what you just said about the necessity of a joint and cooperative investigation, because right now, according to the FBI and Homeland Security investigations, they will handle this investigation by themselves. The state of Minnesota has asked for access in the Renee Good matter and the Alex Pretti matter. How do you regard that request from the state? And historically, are these investigations typically cooperative and joint state-federal?
So just based upon my history of seeing incidents like this being investigated, there's usually a partnership. I think we could all agree that there's a division in this country right now. And if it's being investigated by one agency, there may be some biases involved with the investigation. So I do have some concerns. I think there should be a partnership and to make sure that all the information is provided, and there's also a level of transparency, and if need be, some accountability involved as well.
You also mentioned de-escalatory options. In general, and I know it's a very intense, stressful atmosphere in Minneapolis for lots of different reasons, is the general tactical suggestion, if not training, is to de-escalate situations so they do not result in the use of deadly force? And if so, what other options did those federal officials who were convening on Alex Pretti have that they perhaps did not exercise?
Listen, the one thing that I'm not going to do is Monday morning quarterback what I saw based upon the video. I know there was a little bit of resistance from the observers. I'm not sure how expanded the crime scene was that was might have been violated by the individuals that were trying to take film of the incident. But I will say this, pushing an observer into the snow is not a de-escalation tactic. Using some type of chemical irritant for somebody that's not violently resisting is not a de-escalation tactic. So, just taking a look at some of the federal standards when it comes to training throughout the country for law enforcement agencies, this is not prioritized. There are no standards. And this is something that I'm hoping that all law enforcement agencies around the country take a look at. What are they doing to make sure that their agents, their officers are getting the appropriate training when it comes to civil unrest and First Amendment engagement?
Rodney Harrison, great stuff, so important. I really thank you for your time and your expertise. We turn now to Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Ed, we have some brand new reporting from our colleague, Camila Montoya Galvez, about the status of Customs and Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. What do we know?
We can report now, CBS News has learned that Bovino is departing Minneapolis imminently, as are many other CBP agents, and Bovino at least has been relieved of his command in Minneapolis. He remains in charge of operations across the country. The White House said as much earlier today, but when directly asked whether he would be leaving Minneapolis or relieved of his duties there, they wouldn't directly get into that. Now we have learned, in fact, that is happening. So there perhaps is some accountability for what has happened over the weekend. We had the call this morning between the president and Governor Walz after weeks of nationwide cross-country finger-pointing at each other over this. They've finally spoken, and it appears now it's led to some progress. Bovino will be leaving. Other CBP officers will be leaving. Doesn't mean Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, which, remember, had been in the lead here trying to root out those undocumented immigrants that they were pursuing. But operations would continue in that regard. And now we have Tom Homan, who is ostensibly known as the White House border czar, going into Minneapolis to not only oversee operations when it comes to those ongoing immigration operations, but then the broader Trump administration goal of rooting out alleged fraud in blue states, beginning with Minnesota. After weeks of renewed scrutiny, thanks to conservative commentators online, exposing concerns about daycare centers and other ways that state funding has gone out through the federal government's grants and payments to the state, that will continue with Homan overseeing it all.
And Ed, the president said on social media that Tom Homan, his border czar, will report directly to him. Help the audience read between the lines what that might suggest about Homan, Mr. Bovino, Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, and other immigration officials who've been on the scene there for some period of time.
Yeah, this was the first indication this morning, Major, that something would indeed be up here, that the White House was reacting to the bipartisan outrage expressed in the wake of the shooting death over the weekend. Not only does that mean Homan is bypassing Secretary Noem, not only does it mean that Bovino is on his way out of Minneapolis, it also suggests that Homan goes directly to the president and not through Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff who's overseeing policy, who, of course, has taken the lead on the aggressive immigration enforcement policy that's been put in place over the past year, but who was also among those, Miller was, over the weekend, making baseless accusations about the victim here without an investigation having unfolded first. And it is that rhetoric that so alarmed the White House that this morning, in the midst of this snowstorm and the snow day that Washington is having, they called on the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt to convene all of us and to make clear that the president didn't agree with some of the rhetoric that was coming from those top officials. I think we have a part of her reaction to all of it that we can play here. Take a listen.
Let's be clear about the circumstances which led to that moment on Saturday. This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota. For weeks, Governor Walz and the Mayor Jacob Fry and other elected Democrats were spreading lies about federal law enforcement officers who are risking their lives daily to remove the worst criminal illegal aliens from our streets: murderers, rapists, pedophiles, human traffickers, and gang members.
So again, trying to get at the underlying concerns the administration has had, but they went to great lengths today to distance the president from those statements over the weekend, and now we're seeing some of the results of that decision-making here at the White House, removing Gregory Bovino, head of CBP from Minneapolis, sending in Tom Homan, and the lines of communication between the president and governor now open. Major.
Ed O'Keefe, North Line of the White House. Great stuff. Thank you so much. CBS News Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins me now. Scott, there was a hearing today in which the state of Minnesota asked a federal judge to essentially order the Trump administration to end Operation Metro Surge. The judge did not make a ruling and said there were lots of parameters that had to be studied, precedent, law on the books, and acknowledging this is completely uncharted territory.
Judge had a lot of concerns and expressed them over the course of this lengthy hearing at the federal court in Minneapolis. And she's ordered the Department of Justice to make some responses to questions that were pending and to do so by the middle of the week. Among the things the judge referenced, Major, was this letter sent by Attorney General Pam Bondi to Minnesota state officials indicating, or at least intimating, they'd pull back the troops, they'd pull back the federal agents, they'd pull back the federal deployed Homeland Security agents if the state would hand over information about voter rolls, hand over information about fraud investigations or benefits that are received by people in Minnesota. And the judge was concerned that doesn't seem to be in lockstep with the mission that's been proclaimed for these agents. And what's more, the judge noted that the feds have been challenging Minnesota in the courts on a lot of these issues, from voting rolls to fraud to benefits. And the judge is wondering if they're not trying to secure through force what they can't easily secure in the courts.
Scott MacFarlane, thank you very much. Democratic Minnesota State House member Zach Stevenson joins me now. He serves as the party's caucus leader. I want to ask you about what Scott MacFarlane just referred to, because that letter Saturday evening from the Attorney General did seek specific things from the state of Minnesota that have nothing to do on their face with any kind of immigration enforcement, whatever its dimensions are in the state of Minnesota or in Minneapolis in particular. How do you regard that letter from the Attorney General, and do you have any expectation that Minnesota will comply?
I regard it as extortion. and we won't comply. It's ludicrous, the idea that the president thinks that he can hold the state of Minnesota hostage and insists that we turn over confidential and highly sensitive information about Minnesota citizens in order to get ICE off the streets of Minnesota. We won't be extorted.
It has been just reported, you might have heard, that Gregory Bovino, head of CBP, will be leaving Minneapolis and relieved of his command there, though not nationally, and that CBP officers there, I believe they number about 800, also are going to be pulling out of the city. Your reaction?
It's great news. Greg Bovino has no credibility here in Minnesota. He's been repeatedly saying things to the people of Minnesota that are easily contradicted by our own eyes. And we don't appreciate being lied to. So I'm glad he's leaving. It's a good start. It's not nearly enough.
There is a federal investigation being led by Homeland Security and the FBI. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the state of Minnesota is not involved either in the Alex Pretti investigation or the Renee Good investigation. What's the status of that, and how do you change that dynamic?
You are correct that the state isn't involved in either investigation, but what's important is that's not of our doing. We would very much like to be involved, and we should be involved. That's been the consistent practice of this, through years and years and years across many circumstances. In Minnesota, we have the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. It's a highly regarded investigatory arm of law enforcement. They conduct thorough and nonpartisan investigations. They are built exactly for this task, and they have been deliberately excluded by federal law enforcement agents. That's unacceptable and needs to change. And most dramatically, we saw 6 prosecutors from our state's U.S. Attorney's Office, including the prosecutor, by the way, who was leading the investigations into fraud, resign because of the way that the federal government has been handling the investigation into the murder of Renee Good.
Chris Mattel, a Republican, dropped out of his race for governor today and said that ICE and CBP have been racially profiling Minnesotans, specifically those living in Minneapolis. Your reaction?
Well, he's absolutely right. And it's good to see Republicans reacting to the political disaster that's unfolding before them. I wish they had reacted to the human disaster that preceded it. It's good that people are taking action now, but it's a little too little too late.
What are you looking for, Representative Stevenson, in the next couple of days when you hear the president say he and Governor Walz are on a similar wavelength?
What the people of Minnesota want right now is justice and peace. We want our streets back. We want the public safety that we enjoy here in Minnesota. You know, there's only been 3 killings in Minneapolis so far this year. 2 of them were by federal agents. What's happening in Minnesota right now, the law enforcement action by the federal government is not making our community safer. It's making it more dangerous. And that's why it needs to end. And then there needs to be accountability for anyone who broke Minnesota law. No one is above the law in this country, and that includes federal agents.
Representative Zach Stevenson, state of Minnesota. I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come, the big winter storm did what we feared, left hundreds of thousands without power and snarled travel for planes, trains, and automobiles. Also, lawmakers thought they forged a path to avoid a partial government shutdown. Then, this weekend in Minneapolis, Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy joins me to discuss the effect of one on the other. Plus, Florida Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost said he was assaulted at the Sundance Film Festival. What happened and what's been done about it? The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. Millions of Americans, myself included, are digging out from this weekend's winter storm. The National Weather Service says at least 20 states received more than a foot of snow. So far, at least 18 storm-related deaths have been reported. The country is now in the process of recovering from widespread power outages and travel delays. 11,000 flights were canceled yesterday, the most in a single day since the start of the COVID pandemic, which feels like a very long time ago. CBS News is covering the hardest hit areas. Tom Hansen is in Boston. Jason Allen is in Oklahoma City. Tom, let's start with you.
Hey there, Major. Well, as you can probably see, the snow is still coming down here, and that will continue throughout the evening. But I want to give you a context of just how much snow has fallen so far. So I am about 6 feet tall. I'm standing in untouched snow here. It is practically up to my knees. Now, it also is frigidly cold here, 18 degrees. That feels like 6 degrees currently, and it's only going to get colder as the night progresses. We're talking about a low of around 9 degrees, and that's going to feel like -2. That is a huge concern with this storm. Those frigid temperatures, that cold snap that is going to bear down on the Northeast for the next several days. And that has utility workers primarily concerned not so much on the electricity here, but on the gas lines that heat homes. We spoke with utility workers who have been working around the clock to ensure that those lines remain open and that people can stay warm, because obviously those temperatures can get very dangerous very quickly, Major. And so we're going to be watching this situation very closely over the next several days. Major?
6 feet tall, but a giant at CBS News. Tom Hanson in Boston. Thank you. Jason, over to you. What's going on in Oklahoma City?
You know, Major, we don't have nearly as much snow as Tom does, right? Maybe 9 inches here. And this scene may be typical in the Northeast where he is. It is not typical in Oklahoma City. The storm was done here 2 days ago. Snow and ice stopped falling a couple of days ago. But it is still on the sidewalks. As you look back here, it's still coating the roads. They do have plows here, contrary to maybe what some believe. There are about 34, 35 of them here in the city, and they've been out clearing the roads. But there's a lot of roads to clear. And with the temperatures here, they have been down into the single digits for the last couple of nights. Things are just not melting off. So some of the same concerns that Tom was just talking about are the case here as well. They're concerned about pipes still breaking. They're concerned about collapses from heavy snow or ice that may be on buildings. And there are some of the same concerns further to the south in Texas. When you have a storm like this here and it lasts for a couple of days, really the only thing that helps is the sun coming out. We're glad it's out right now. It's warmed up into the 20s. Should hopefully get back above freezing here, maybe by tomorrow. That's what we're hoping for, Major.
Tom Hanson, Jason Allen, thank you both very, very much. Want to bring in Rob Marciano from New York to bring us the latest on the forecast for the week. Rob, what do we know?
Well, Major, the cold air, I can feel it against my face. Temperatures are going to drop here. Although, as you know, here in New York City, it's just a mess on the streets itself. They put so much salt on here. It does melt, and we get enough traffic to where we get this slush. But the piles of snow here are what's impressive. They just don't. It's not like D.C., some other places are a little more spread out. They don't have places to put this. So they physically have to come in here with front loaders, put them in dump trucks, and dump it and take it out to see. By the way, this is a bus stop. If you want to come here, go to Louis Vuitton, Tiffany, and do your shopping, this is the spot. All right, this storm is winding down and winding out. So there's still some snow showers that have been accumulating across parts of the Northeast. But the cold air coming in behind us, the big story. Some of the snow totals, they'll throw them up there. I can't see them, but you get the idea. Nearly 19 inches in Boston, here in New York City, nearly a foot. And the list goes on and on and on. So many cities hitting historic numbers as far as snowfall goes. And I think we're going to see historic numbers as far as the stretch of days, Major, that we see below the freezing mark. And that's going to be problematic, not just here in the Northeast, but across parts of the Midwest and the Mid-South that saw all that frozen precipitation. It's going to be a pretty bad winter, I'll say that.
Exactly. Louis Vuitton, what's that? No, Rob Marciano. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, buddy.
Next, my conversation with Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. That's coming up right here on You Know the Name. It's The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Congress has until Friday to avert a partial government shutdown. As a result of this weekend's deadly shooting in Minneapolis, Senate Democrats have vowed to block a 6-bill package of spending bills that includes, among other things, funding for ICE and Border Patrol, and it doesn't have any reforms to it. Earlier, I spoke to Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy about that and related issues. Please take a listen. Senator, summarize the weekend in Minneapolis and what you believe the events there might mean for the future of the country.
Well, I think Americans are just horrified by what they saw over the weekend and frankly have been horrified for weeks. Minneapolis is a dystopia and it's out of control because DHS and ICE are there disobeying the law on a daily basis. Trump isn't there to try to enhance public safety. He's there to create confrontation and chaos. And the easiest thing that needs to happen right now is for ICE to leave Minneapolis. But that's not the only place that the lawlessness is happening. All across the country, Trump is just making up his own law when it comes to immigration. He's disappearing thousands of people who are here legally, applying for asylum. He's locking up people with green cards, American citizens. I think the country saw what happened over the weekend, the second killing on videotape, and have just said enough. The executive branch is out of control. There doesn't seem to be any checks on their lawlessness. And it's brought us to this point where Democrats have said, listen, we just, in good conscience, in upholding our oath, cannot fund this version of the Department of Homeland Security. If there are reforms, if they start to obey the law, if they stop harassing citizens, then that's a department that we can fund. But until we get those commitments, until we get those reforms built into the law, we're not going to be able to condone this kind of out of control department.
Senator, we'll get to that funding dispute in a moment. From the podium today, the White House press secretary said the underlying cause of what happened this weekend in Minneapolis was the deliberate, hostile resistance of Mayor Jacob Frey and Governor Tim Walz. Your response?
Well, that's simply not true, and the administration has been lying through their teeth all weekend. I mean, they called this guy an assassin. They said that he was trying to murder these officers. Every single person has seen the videotape. He was simply exercising his First Amendment right, videotaping the officers. They confronted him, and then when he was trying to help a woman who was also being assaulted by the officers, they killed him. Plain and simple. So you can't trust anything this administration is saying. It's all spin. It's often outright lies. I guess, the American people don't really have to listen to them anymore. They see the videos. They see these officers, doing sweeps of streets in which they're just asking people who have an accent whether they're American citizens, forcing them to show papers. Nobody wants to live in a show your papers society. That sounds like a dystopian, totalitarian state, not the United States of America. So I think people have decided all across the country that this kind of abuse has to come to an end.
Senator, you have suggested legislatively and otherwise that there's an overbroad interpretation of Second Amendment rights in our country and more regulation ought to be done on behalf of public safety. I wonder how you are analyzing the Second Amendment conflicts that have cropped up within the Trumpian movement after Alex Pretti's death.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing that the Trump administration is using as a justification for this killing the fact that this individual was legally carrying a gun. I think for Republicans, they believe in the right of people to carry concealed loaded weapons, but only if they're Republicans. Apparently, if you oppose the president politically and you carry a weapon with a permit, that's a justification for murder. Listen, I don't like these concealed carry laws. I think they generally make communities less safe. But I also don't believe that an individual who is complying with a state concealed carry law marks himself for murder by federal law enforcement officials. I think it's pretty wild that they are claiming one of the reasons this guy is dead is because he was carrying a gun, when the same people in the Trump administration have been pushing for years to get states to pass laws that allow people to carry concealed weapons.
Back to the funding dispute. It's been made clear by the Senate Republican leadership just today that they're going to proceed with what the House has passed. 6 bills together are not going to separate out the DHS funding bill, which I believe you and other Democrats are demanding. Does that mean we are heading toward another partial government shutdown?
Well, it appears that Republicans are going to force a shutdown, and we've made it very clear that we want a standalone debate on the Department of Homeland Security bill because the American people want an end to this lawlessness, and so we think it's appropriate to debate and pass some amendments to the Department of Homeland Security bill. But that doesn't mean all the other agencies have to shut down. As I understand it, there are Democratic votes sufficient to pass the other bills. All Leader Thune has to do is to put the other 5 bills on the Senate floor. They will pass. The Department of Defense will be funded. The Department of Transportation will be funded. It's his choice to shut down all those other agencies. And frankly, it's their choice to shut down the Department of Homeland Security, because nothing we're asking for is unreasonable. We're simply asking for restraints on DHS so that they comply with the law. We're not talking about comprehensive immigration reform. We're not proposing to do away with ICE in this bill. We are simply talking about some restraints that will stop the horrific scenes that we are seeing in Minneapolis.
Tom Homan is heading to Minneapolis. He is the president's border czar. How do you regard that maneuver?
I have no idea. I mean, he is not a figure of restraint. I hope that after the phone call between the president and the governor, there's an effort to de-escalate. I think it's been, remarkable how peaceful the protesters in Minneapolis have been, but it's up to the president to decide. No matter who he deploys to Minneapolis, the buck stops in the Oval Office. If the president wants to comply with the law, then he needs to withdraw ICE and CBP from Minneapolis. Only he can make that decision.
Will you accept the result of a Homeland Security, FBI, and Customs and Border Patrol investigation into this matter alone?
No, there has to be a state investigation. Every single time there's a murder or a shooting like this, a state has a right to investigate. So no, there's no reason why the state of Minnesota, as is the practice, should be able to do a concurrent investigation.
Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. Appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
A CBS News investigation shows serious privacy concerns with X's AI agent called Grok persist. What the company says about it and the potential repercussions that could follow. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. A CBS News investigation finds the AI tool Grok on Elon Musk's social media platform X is still allowing users to digitally undress people without their consent. Company leaders previously pledged to stop the chatbot's ability to edit images of real people and show them in revealing clothing like underwear or bikinis. The British government is weighing a nationwide ban if new guardrails are not put in place, and soon. CBS News requested comment from XAI and received what appeared to be an auto reply that did not address the findings in our investigation. It only read, quote, legacy media lies. But do your eyes? That's the question. A man has been arrested for allegedly assaulting Florida Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost at the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah, over the weekend. Frost claims his attacker said racist remarks, including that President Trump would deport him before and after he was punched in the face. Local police confirmed they apprehended a suspect who has been booked on charges of assault and aggravated battery. The impact Minneapolis is having in Washington on our politics, specifically future government funding. Our political panel will join me next to assess that and much more. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Political panel time. Let's bring them in. Republican strategist, former Romney Ryan senior advisor Kevin Sheridan, Democratic strategist, CBS News political contributor Joel Payne. Gentlemen, just moments ago, Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis released a statement. He spoke by phone with President Trump, called the conversation something that he appreciated. Some federal agents, as we reported earlier in this program, will begin leaving the area tomorrow. He said he plans to meet with border czar Tom Homan to further discuss next steps. Kevin, your reaction. This is now 2 phone calls, Governor Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis, who the administration outwardly says are the problem here, but clearly the president is engaging. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that I'd be interested to see if he gets any concessions out of the mayor and the governor in terms of local PD support, because right now they've been pulled back, and that's the whole reason why Border Patrol was even in Minneapolis. They shouldn't be there. They should
not be there.
They're doing crowd control.
That's what you say.
Yeah, but while they're doing, I don't think they want to be there necessarily. The local police should be doing this. If he has to send in the National Guard, he should do that. He did that in L.A. He could do it again.
Meaning the president, not the governor.
Well, yeah, and the governor has already called them in. We don't know what they're even doing, but clearly they need to get control over these crowds. This is not a, this is a very well-funded, very connected operation that's going on there. These are not just random protests. These people are coordinating. They're on signal, and they are trying to
Is coordination an offense in America under the judicial code?
Impede, yeah, it sure is, to impede a lawful law enforcement action, which is what these ICE agents and Border Patrol guys were doing. They were going after criminal illegals. 70% of their arrests in Minnesota have been criminals with a criminal history. So 30% have not. But that's what they're going for, and it's a dangerous situation for everybody to be in without support.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Kevin would have that take. You know, been thinking a lot about this, and look, obviously, like morally, this is a president who's morally bankrupt, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This is an administration. This is a regime that's morally bankrupt. But you're here for my political opinion. My political opinion is you're seeing a pretty significant climb down from this president. You're seeing a pretty significant retreat from this president and from the people around him. Not only the call to walls and fray today, Caroline Leavitt at the briefing today essentially threw Stephen Miller under the bus for calling this man who was killed by Donald Trump's immigration force a domestic terrorist. She did not own that statement. She backed the president off of that statement. You've had Tom Homan go into the area. Greg Bovino is leaving the area. I think it's a tacit acknowledgement that this has gone beyond too far, and that the president understands the political damage is real here. I think the question is the stain permanent? I think it is permanent, and I think it's something that every Republican who runs behind this administration will have to own at least through 2026 and probably beyond.
Gentlemen, I want to play for you sound from Chris Mattel, who ended his Republican bid for the governorship of Minnesota today. By the way, just for the audience's benefit, Chris Mattel is an attorney in Minnesota. He provided advice to the Border Patrol agent who killed Renee Good on how to obtain proper defense counsel should there be any investigation. So he is not a softie on this issue. I want you to listen, both of you, to what he said today about what's gone on in Minneapolis.
And I have read about and I have spoken to countless United States citizens who have been detained in Minnesota due to the color of their skin. I personally have spoken to several law enforcement officers, some Hispanic and some Asian, who have been pulled over by ICE on pretextual stops. Driving while Hispanic is not a crime. Either is driving while Asian. And the reality is that the National Republicans have made it nearly impossible for a Republican to win a statewide election in Minnesota. It is a simple fact.
Kevin. I don't know a lot about him. I know he was Kirby Puckett's attorney. I don't.
Well, what he's saying
I don't know.
ought to matter to any American, right?
Clearly he has strong feelings on this. And
driving while Hispanic, driving while Asian is not crime.
The race, but is he leaving the party? Is he saying that he's not going to be a Republican anymore? I don't know. But there's a lot of other Republicans running in that race, and somebody's going to.
Surprising. So you feel good about this politically?
No,
I'm shocked.
No, I just don't. I'm not where you are on this. I don't think that. Look, this is a very ugly, complicated situation, and it's been made uglier and more complicated because the Minneapolis PD have been pulled back, and they are
the same PD that's actually being profiled by Donald Trump's ICE.
They are not supporting the ICE agents who are arresting criminals. These are criminal illegals that are in the country. That's who they're going after.
Joel,
it's a dangerous situation.
You got 15 seconds.
Why would this is going to take more than 15 seconds? I guess I would just say I'm very surprised that Republicans would lean into this politically. I think it's a mistake. I think they're going to regret it.
Kevin Sheridan, Joel Payne, that's it. Appreciate the time. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout. You know what we are, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is coming up next.